The stars shimmered like diamonds scattered across black velvet, their light cold and distant. In the vast emptiness of space, humanity's first interstellar colony on Elysium 7 floated silently, a fragile beacon of hope against the endless void. The colony was humanity's pride, a testament to courage, innovation, and the unyielding desire to explore the unknown. But tonight, something unusual stirred the calm. Captain Leora Vance sat in the dimly lit command center of the Starblade, her sharp eyes scanning rows of blinking monitors. She leaned forward slightly, her fingers tapping rhythmically on the armrest of her chair. Her crew bustled around her, their voices low but urgent as they analyzed data streaming in from deep space. Leora's heart raced, not out of fear, but excitement. Something had caught their attention, something no one could ignore. It started as static, a faint crackle buried beneath layers of cosmic noise. At first, the technicians dismissed it as interference from solar winds or stray radiation. But then came the words, fragmented yet unmistakable. "Help! They are coming." The transmission repeated itself every few minutes, its origin traced to an uncharted region of space known as the Abyssal Expanse. The Abyssal Expanse wasn't just any part of the galaxy, it was infamous. Stories about it spread among spacers like ghost tales around a campfire. It was said to be home to planets so hostile that even machines couldn't survive there for long. Violent storms, crushing gravity, and ecosystems teeming with predatory creatures made it a death trap for anyone foolish enough to venture inside. Yet here they were, staring at coordinates leading straight into its heart. Leora turned to her second-in-command, Commander Elias Drake, who stood nearby with his arms crossed. "What do you think?" she asked, her voice steady despite the weight of the decision before her. Elias frowned. "Central Command won't approve this. You know what they'll say. Too risky, too costly, too many unknowns." "I don't care what they'll say," Leora replied firmly. Her gaze shifted back to the screen displaying the signal. "Someone, or something, is out there asking for help. We can't just ignore them." "But why us?" Elias pressed. "We're explorers, not rescuers. And the Abyssal Expanse, that place eats ships whole." Leora stood up, her tall frame radiating determination. "Because if we don't go, who will? If there's even a chance someone needs our help, we owe it to them, and to ourselves, to try." Her words hung in the air, heavy with conviction. After a moment, Elias sighed and nodded. "All right, I'll prep the crew. But don't blame me when things get messy." As the crew scrambled to ready the Starblade for departure, Leora gazed out the viewport at the swirling nebula beyond. Somewhere out there, hidden in the darkness, lay answers waiting to be uncovered. She didn't know what they'd find in the Abyssal Expanse. Danger, mystery, or perhaps both. But one thing was certain. Turning away wasn't an option. Not for her. Not for humanity. With engines roaring to life, the Starblade broke free from Elysium 7's orbit and set course for the unknown. Behind them, the colony grew smaller until it vanished entirely, swallowed by the infinite expanse of space. Ahead, only silence and the haunting echo of a desperate plea awaited. The Starblade cut through the void like a silver arrow, its sleek hull reflecting the faint glow of distant stars. Inside, the hum of the engines was a constant reminder of the journey ahead. The crew worked tirelessly, their movements precise and focused as they prepared for what lay beyond. Captain Leora Vance stood on the bridge, her hands clasped behind her back, staring at the swirling mass of darkness that marked the edge of the Abyssal Expanse. On the main screen, the expanse loomed, a chaotic tangle of asteroid fields, glowing gas clouds, and gravitational anomalies that twisted light into eerie spirals. It looked less like a region of space and more like a living thing, pulsing with danger. The navigation officer, Ensign Revi Patel, adjusted his glasses nervously as he studied the readings. "Captain," he said, his voice tinged with unease, "gravitational fluctuations are off the charts. One wrong move, and we'll be pulled apart." Leora nodded but didn't flinch. "Stay sharp, Ravi. We've faced worse." She glanced over her shoulder at Commander Elias Drake, who leaned against the wall with his arms crossed. "Elias, I want all shields reinforced and thrusters ready for evasive maneuvers." "Aye, Captain," Elias replied, though his tone suggested he wasn't thrilled about venturing deeper into such treacherous territory. As the ship entered the expanse, the calm of open space gave way to chaos. Asteroids tumbled unpredictably, their jagged surfaces glinting menacingly in the dim light. Streams of ionized particles crackled around them, interfering with sensors and communications. Alarms blared intermittently as the ship's systems struggled to compensate for the unstable environment. "Shields holding at 60%, shouted Tessa Monroe, the ship's medic-turned-engineer, from her station. Her fingers flew across the console as she rerouted power to critical systems. "But if this keeps up, we're going to have problems." "Keep us steady, Ravi," Leora ordered, her voice firm despite the tension in the air. "We're almost there." Minutes felt like hours as the Starblade navigated the perilous field. Just when it seemed they might make it through unscathed, a massive asteroid hurtled toward them, its jagged edges gleaming ominously. Elias barked orders, and the pilot yanked the controls hard to starboard. The ship shuddered violently as everyone grabbed onto whatever they could to stay upright. "That was too close," muttered Malik Hassan, the ship's engineer, wiping sweat from his brow. He shot a glare at Ravi. "Next time, warn us before you send us into certain death." Ravi raised his hands defensively. "I can only work with what the scanners give me. This place is insane." Finally, after what felt like an eternity, the turbulence subsided. Ahead, a planet emerged from the haze, a swirling maelstrom of storms that painted its surface in shades of crimson and gold. Lightning arced across its skies, illuminating strange structures jutting out from the ground like broken teeth. It was both beautiful and terrifying. "There," Leora said, pointing at the planet. "That has to be where the signal's coming from." The crew stared in awe as the Starblade descended toward the surface. As they broke through the thick cloud cover, the true scale of the ruins became apparent. Towering spires rose from the landscape, their metallic surfaces corroded by time and weather. Alien vegetation wrapped around the structures, glowing faintly in hues of blue and green. Strange symbols etched into the walls pulsed with a soft, rhythmic light, as though alive. "This place, it's incredible," whispered Tessa, her voice filled with wonder. "What kind of civilization built this?" "No idea," Leora replied, her eyes scanning the horizon. "But we're about to find out." The ship touched down gently on a flat stretch of land near the largest ruin. Leora turned to her team. "Suit up. Stay alert. And remember, whatever happens, stick together." One by one, the crew stepped onto the alien soil, their boots sinking slightly into the soft, moss-like ground. The air was thick with an electric charge, making the hairs on their necks stand on end. Somewhere in the distance, a low rumble echoed, sending a chill down their spines. They had arrived, but as they approached the ruins, none of them could shake the feeling that they were being watched. The ruins stretched endlessly before them, their towering spires casting long shadows under the planet's dim, stormy light. The air crackled with energy, and every step the crew took seemed to echo unnaturally loud against the ancient structures. Captain Leora Vance led the way, her hand resting on the grip of her sidearm as she scanned the surroundings. Her team followed closely behind, their faces tense but determined. "This place feels alive," muttered Tessa Monroe, glancing nervously at the glowing symbols etched into the walls. The symbols pulsed faintly, almost in rhythm with her heartbeat. "Like it's watching us." "Stay focused," Leora said sharply, though her own eyes darted around cautiously. She didn't like this either. Something about the atmosphere set her instincts on edge. But they had a mission, and turning back wasn't an option. As they moved deeper into the ruins, the ground beneath their feet shifted slightly, covered in a thick layer of moss-like vegetation that glowed faintly blue. Strange vines coiled around the metallic pillars, pulsing with an inner light. The symbols grew more intricate the further they went, forming patterns that seemed to tell a story, but one written in a language no one could understand. "Ravi, see if you can scan these markings," Leora instructed, gesturing toward the walls. "Maybe we can figure out what they mean." Ensign Ravi Patel knelt down, pulling out a handheld scanner. As he ran it over the symbols, the device emitted a series of high-pitched beeps. "There's some kind of energy script," he reported, his brow furrowed in concentration. "But I've never seen anything like it. It's not matching any known database." Before anyone could respond, Malik Hassan let out a sharp gasp. "Captain, look at this." He pointed to a massive structure ahead, a circular platform surrounded by jagged spires. At its center stood what appeared to be a crystalline artifact, shimmering faintly with an otherworldly glow. Leora approached cautiously, her boots crunching softly on the mossy ground. The artifact was unlike anything she'd ever seen, its surface smooth and translucent, with veins of golden light running through it like liquid fire. It hummed gently, resonating with the same rhythm as the glowing symbols. "It's beautiful," Tessa whispered, stepping closer. "Do you think it's part of their technology?" "Could be," Leora replied, her voice low. "But don't touch it until we know more." Her warning came too late. As Tessa reached out to examine the artifact more closely, her foot caught on a loose vine. She stumbled forward, her hand brushing against the crystal. For a moment, nothing happened. Then the artifact flared brightly, emitting a deafening screech that sent the entire team stumbling backward. "What did you do?" Elias Drake barked, grabbing Tessa's arm to steady her. I didn't mean to." Tessa stammered, her face pale. "It just..." Before she could finish, the ground trembled violently. The glowing symbols on the walls erupted into blinding flashes of light, and the air filled with a deep, resonant hum. From the shadows between the spires, massive shapes began to emerge. The creatures were unlike anything the crew had ever encountered. Towering over them, their bodies were a mix of organic and mechanical parts, gleaming exoskeletons fused seamlessly with pulsating organs. Their insectoid heads glowed with eerie green light, and their multifaceted eyes locked onto the intruders with predatory focus. Golden cores embedded in their chests pulsed in sync with the artifact's hum. "Deathworlders," Leora breathed, her hand instinctively moving to draw her weapon. "Everyone, stay calm. Don't make any sudden moves." But calm was short-lived. One of the creatures let out a piercing shriek, raising a clawed limb toward the damaged artifact. Its posture radiated hostility, and the others followed suit, surrounding the humans in a tight circle. "We need to leave. Now," Elias shouted, already backing away. "No argument here," Malik added, clutching his toolkit like a makeshift shield. Leora hesitated for a split second, trying to gauge whether communication was possible. But when one of the Deathworlders lunged forward, claws slashing through the air, she made her decision. "Fall back to the ship. Move." The crew turned and sprinted toward the Starblade, their hearts pounding as the Deathworlders gave chase. The alien creatures moved with terrifying speed, their heavy footsteps shaking the ground. Lightning flashed overhead, illuminating the chaos as the humans dodged crumbling debris and tangled vines. Reaching the ship felt like crossing a battlefield. By the time they scrambled aboard, breathless and shaken, the Deathworlders had stopped pursuing, but their glowing eyes remained fixed on the Starblade, watching silently from the ruins. Back aboard the Starblade, the crew gathered in the briefing room, their faces etched with exhaustion and unease. The encounter with the Deathworlders had left them rattled, but there was no time to rest, not when so many questions remained unanswered. Captain Leora Vance stood at the head of the table, her arms crossed as she studied the holographic display projected in the center. It showed a rough map of the ruins they'd just fled, along with fragments of data collected during their brief exploration. "We need answers," Leora said firmly, breaking the tense silence. What were those creatures? Why did they attack us? And what's the connection between that artifact and the distress signal? Tessa Monroe leaned forward, her fingers tracing absent patterns on the edge of the table. They didn't seem hostile at first. They were just guarding something, like sentinels. Sentinels don't chase you halfway across a planet, Malik Hassan countered, his voice sharp. He still clutched his toolkit tightly, as if it might offer some comfort. Whatever they are, they're dangerous. Agreed, Elias Drake chimed in, his tone measured but serious. But we can't ignore the fact that they reacted only after Tessa touched the artifact. That thing must be important. To them. And maybe to whoever sent the signal. Leora nodded. Ravi, pull up everything we scanned from those symbols and the artifact. Let's see if we can piece together what's going on. Ravi Patel adjusted his glasses and tapped furiously at his console. After a moment, the hologram shifted, displaying intricate patterns of glowing symbols alongside fragmented readings from the artifact. The symbols appear to be some kind of language, he explained, pointing to specific sections. It's not human, obviously, but the AI is trying to decode it based on contextual clues. As Ravi worked, the symbols began to rearrange themselves into crude approximations of words. One phrase stood out, Guardians of the Core. The Core, Tessa repeated, frowning. You think that refers to the artifact? It has to, Leora replied. And if those creatures are guardians, then someone, or something, put them there to protect it. The AI continued analyzing, cross-referencing the symbols with known galactic languages. Slowly, more information emerged. Fragments of text hinted at an ancient race called the Deathworlders, a civilization far advanced beyond anything humanity had encountered. According to the translations, the Deathworlders had created the Deathworlders as biomechanical defenders against an existential threat. What kind of threat? Malik asked, his brow furrowed. Ravi hesitated before answering. Something called the Harvesters. His voice dropped slightly as he read further. They're described as parasitic entities capable of consuming entire worlds. The Deathworlders built the Deathworlders to stop them. A heavy silence fell over the room. The weight of the revelation hung in the air like a storm cloud. Finally, Elias broke the quiet. So the distress signal, it wasn't meant for us. It was a warning broadcast by the Deathworlders before they were wiped out. And now the Harvesters are coming here. Leora finished, her expression grim. She turned back to the hologram, her mind racing. If the Deathworlders are guardians, then destroying the artifact might have triggered their hostility. To them, we're intruders threatening the very thing they were created to protect. But why would the Deathworlders leave a warning? Tessa wondered aloud. Why not evacuate or fight back? Maybe they couldn't, Leora suggested softly. Or maybe they tried and failed. Either way, the message is clear. The Harvesters are real, and they're heading toward Elysium 7. The realization hit the crew like a punch to the gut. Their colony, their home, was in danger. For a moment, no one spoke. The enormity of the situation pressed down on them, suffocating and undeniable. We need to warn Central Command, Elias said finally, his voice steady despite the tension in the room. Tell them what we've learned. Leora shook her head. Even if they believe us, it'll take weeks for reinforcements to reach Elysium 7. By then, it could be too late. Then what do we do? Malik asked, his frustration evident. Leora straightened, her eyes blazing with determination. We go back. The others stared at her, stunned. Back, Tessa echoed. To the Deathworlders. After what happened? Yes, Leora replied firmly. They're the key to stopping the Harvesters. If we can convince them to work with us, if we can prove we're allies instead of enemies, we might stand a chance. Elias sighed heavily, but nodded. All right, but how do we earn their trust? That's what we figure out next, Leora said, turning back to the hologram. Her gaze hardened as she added, because sitting here isn't an option. Not anymore. The decision to return to the ruins weighed heavily on Captain Leora Vance as she prepared for what could easily become a suicide mission. The crew had spent hours debating strategies, but no plan felt foolproof. Facing the Deathworlders again meant risking their lives, and possibly angering them further. Yet, Leora knew they had no choice. If humanity stood any chance against the looming threat of the Harvesters, they needed the Deathworlders on their side. "I'll go alone," Leora announced suddenly, her voice cutting through the tense silence in the briefing room. "What?" Malik Hassan exclaimed, his eyes wide with disbelief. "Are you insane? Those things nearly tore us apart last time." "She's right," Elias Drake interjected, surprising everyone. He leaned forward, his arms resting on the table. "Sending all of us back would look like an attack. One person, especially someone they've already seen, is less threatening. And if it goes wrong..." His voice trailed off, but the implication hung in the air. If Leora failed, at least the rest of the crew would still be safe. Leora nodded, her expression resolute. "I'll take a translator device and try to communicate directly with their leader. If I can show them we're not enemies, maybe we can work together." Tessa Monroe frowned. Concern etched across her face. "But how will you even find their leader? For all we know, those creatures don't have one." "They do," Ravi Patel chimed in, pointing to the holographic display. "Remember the symbols? There was mention of a queen. Nixora, I think her name is. She's likely the one in charge." Leora straightened, determination hardening her features. "Then I'll find Nixora and make her understand. We're running out of time." Hours later, Leora stood at the edge of the Starblade's ramp, clad in reinforced armor and carrying only a small satchel with essential tools. The stormy skies above churned ominously, casting jagged shadows over the ruins. Her heart pounded as she stepped onto the alien soil once more, every instinct screaming at her to turn back. But she pushed forward, her steps deliberate and steady. As she approached the circular platform, where the artifact still hummed faintly, she noticed movement in the distance. The Deathworlders emerged silently from the shadows, their glowing cores pulsating with an eerie light. They surrounded her in moments, their massive forms towering over her like living statues of wrath. Leora froze, raising her hand slowly to show she carried no weapons. "I'm here to talk," she said aloud, activating the translator device trapped to her wrist. It emitted a series of harmonic vibrations, similar to the ones the Deathworlders used to communicate. Though crude, the attempt seemed to catch their attention. Their heads tilted slightly, studying her with multifaceted eyes that gleamed with intelligence. One of the creatures stepped forward, a larger, more ornate version of the others. Its golden core shone brighter, and intricate patterns adorned its exoskeleton. This had to be Nixara, the queen. Leora took a deep breath and gestured toward the artifact, then mimicked the shape of a world with her hands, hoping the gesture would convey planets and destruction. She pointed skyward, mimicking incoming danger, the Harvesters. Finally, she placed a hand over her chest and bowed slightly, signaling peace and alliance. For a long moment, Nixara stared at her, unmoving. Then, without warning, the queen let out a low, resonant hum. The sound reverberated through the air, making Leora's bones vibrate. Images flooded her mind, visions of devastation, of worlds consumed by shadowy entities, of the Evorians' final stand. She staggered under the weight of the shared memory, clutching her head as tears pricked her eyes. When the vision ended, Nixara extended one clawed limb toward Leora, holding something small and crystalline. It was another relic, smaller than the artifact, but glowing with the same energy. Leora hesitated, then reached out cautiously to take it. As soon as her fingers brushed the object, warmth spread through her body, and she understood. This was proof of trust. Nixara let out another hum, softer this time, and stepped aside, allowing Leora to leave unharmed. The message was clear. If humanity wanted the Deathworlders' help, they would need to prove themselves worthy. The relic was both a test and a promise. Clutching the crystal tightly, Leora turned and walked back toward the Starblade, her mind racing. She didn't fully understand what the relic required, but one thing was certain: earning the Deathworlders' trust wouldn't come easy. Back aboard the Starblade, Leora Vance held the small crystalline relic in her hand, its faint glow pulsing like a heartbeat. The crew gathered around her, their faces tense with anticipation as she recounted her encounter with Nyxara, the Deathworlder Queen. "She gave me this," Leora explained, holding up the relic for everyone to see. "But it's not just a gift, it's a test. Nyxara wants proof that we're worthy of their trust." "Worthy?" Malik Hassan echoed, his voice tinged with frustration. "What does that even mean? Do they expect us to fight them or something?" "No," Leora replied firmly, shaking her head. "It's more than that. Nyxara showed me visions, images of destruction caused by the harvesters. She's seen entire civilizations fall because they weren't prepared. To earn their alliance, we need to prove we're capable of standing against such a threat." Ravi Patel adjusted his glasses and leaned closer to examine the relic. "This thing is emitting some kind of energy signature. Maybe it's tied to whatever trial they have in mind." Tessa Monroe frowned, crossing her arms. "And what happens if we fail? Do we lose their support entirely?" Leora hesitated before answering. "I don't know, but I do know one thing. We can't afford to fail." Before anyone could respond, the ship's sensors began beeping urgently. On the main screen, a thermal image revealed a massive fissure opening near the edge of the ruins. Streams of molten lava bubbled within, illuminating the jagged walls of the chasm. Hovering above it was another glowing object, a larger crystal embedded deep within the rock. "That's it," Ravi said, pointing at the screen. "The relic's energy matches the signal coming from that crystal. Whatever Nyxara wants us to retrieve, it's down there." Elias Drake let out a low whistle. "Looks like we're about to find out how worthy we really are." The fissure was a nightmare made real. The air shimmered with heat, distorting the view of the bubbling magma below. Jagged rocks jutted out like teeth, making descent treacherous. Toxic gases swirled around them, forcing the team to wear respirators. Every step felt like walking on the edge of oblivion. "This place is a death trap," Malik muttered under his breath, clutching his toolkit tightly. Sweat dripped down his face despite the cooling systems in his suit. "If we slip, we're toast." "Stay focused," Leora ordered, her voice steady but firm. She glanced back at her team, ensuring everyone was still together. Tessa carried a medical kit slung over her shoulder, while Elias scanned the area with a handheld device, looking for safe paths. Ravi trailed behind, recording data furiously. As they descended deeper into the fissure, the environment grew increasingly hostile. Strange, insect-like creatures scurried along the walls, their eyes glinting menacingly in the dim light. One lunged suddenly, its claws scraping against Malik's armor. He yelped and swung his tool wildly, knocking it away. "Watch it," Elias barked, firing a stun blast at the creature. It screeched and retreated into the shadows, but the sound echoed ominously, drawing more of its kin. "We need to move faster," Leora urged, quickening her pace. "These things aren't going to wait for us to catch our breath." Finally, after what felt like hours, they reached the ledge where the crystal was embedded. It pulsed rhythmically, its golden veins radiating warmth. Leora approached cautiously, examining the rock formation surrounding it. "It's stable enough," she said, turning to Ravi. "Can you extract it without triggering a collapse?" Ravi nodded, already pulling out tools. "I'll try, but this isn't going to be easy." As he worked, the ground trembled violently. A cascade of rocks tumbled down from above, narrowly missing Tessa, who screamed and stumbled backward. Malik rushed to steady her, while Elias fired warning shots at approaching predators. "Hurry up, Ravi," Leora shouted, shielding her face from falling debris. I'm almost done, Ravi replied, his hands trembling as he carefully detached the crystal. With a final crack, the relic came free. The fissure groaned ominously, signaling imminent collapse. "Let's go," Lyora yelled, grabbing Ravi's arm and hauling him to his feet. The team sprinted toward the surface, dodging falling rocks and leaping over cracks that split the ground beneath them. Just as they reached the rim of the fissure, a massive explosion erupted below, sending a wave of heat washing over them. They collapsed onto solid ground, gasping for air as the fissure sealed itself behind them. Malik lay sprawled on his back, laughing weakly. "Well, that was fun." Lyora stood, brushing dust off her armor. She looked at the crystal in Ravi's hands, its glow now brighter than ever. "We did it," she said softly, her voice filled with quiet pride. "Now let's hope it's enough." In the distance, the Deathworlders watched silently, their glowing cores flickering in approval. The return to the Starblade was met with a mix of relief and exhaustion. The crew stumbled aboard, their suits scorched and their faces streaked with sweat and grime. Lyora Vance held the newly retrieved crystal tightly in her hand, its golden glow casting faint shadows across the dimly lit interior of the ship. Despite their harrowing escape from the volcanic fissure, there was no time to rest. The weight of what lay ahead pressed heavily on all of them. "Well?" Elias Drake asked, his voice sharp but tinged with unease. "Did we pass their little test?" Lyora didn't answer immediately. Instead, she placed the crystal into a containment unit on the central console. As soon as it locked into place, the relic began emitting a low hum that resonated through the ship. Moments later, the holographic display flickered to life, projecting intricate patterns resembling the glowing symbols they'd seen in the ruins. "It's sensing," Ravi Patel said, his eyes wide with fascination as he analyzed the readings. "This crystal contains some kind of blueprint, weapon designs, shield configurations, even tactical strategies." Tessa Monroe leaned closer, her brow furrowed. "You're saying this is how we fight the Harvesters?" "Not just us," Lyora replied, her tone firm. "This is how we and the Deathworlders fight together." The realization hit the crew like a tidal wave. They weren't just retrieving tools, they were forging an alliance. But the enormity of the task ahead quickly overshadowed any sense of triumph. Preparing for war against an enemy as powerful as the Harvesters would require every ounce of ingenuity, courage, and teamwork they could muster. Over the next several hours, the Starblade transformed into a hive of activity. Malik Hassan worked tirelessly in the engineering bay, modifying their weapon systems to interface with the crystal's energy output. Sparks flew as he welded new components onto plasma rifles and reinforced the ship's shields. Tessa assisted him, patching up damaged equipment and ensuring everyone stayed hydrated and alert despite the grueling pace. Meanwhile, Ravi and Elias collaborated on integrating the crystal's data into the ship's eye. The process was painstaking. Each fragment of information had to be decoded and adapted for human use. Lines of code scrolled across screens as they calibrated targeting algorithms and simulated battle scenarios. Lyora paced the bridge, her mind racing with plans and contingencies. She knew leadership meant more than giving orders. It meant staying strong when others faltered. Yet flashes of doubt gnawed at her resolve. Memories of past failures surfaced unbidden. Battles lost, comrades left behind, decisions that haunted her still. She clenched her fists, forcing herself to focus. This wasn't about redemption. It was about survival. As night fell over the alien planet, Nixara, and a contingent of Deathworlders approached the Starblade. Their glowing cores pulsed in synchronized rhythm, signaling readiness. Lyora stepped outside to meet them, carrying a prototype weapon powered by the crystal. Its sleek design combined human engineering with Deathworlder biomechanics, creating something entirely new. "This is our first step," Lyora said, holding up the weapon. Through the translator device, her words translated into harmonic vibrations. "Together, we can stop the Harvesters." Nixara tilted her massive head, studying the weapon before extending one clawed limb. Lyora handed it over cautiously, watching as Nyxura examined it closely. After a moment, the queen let out a deep hum of approval. Her warriors took turns testing the weapon, their movements precise and deliberate. They accepted, Ravi whispered from the ramp, his voice filled with awe. They trust us now. But trust came with responsibility. Nyxura shared another vision, a glimpse of the harvester's arrival. Shadows swarmed across skies, devouring light and life. Planets crumbled under their onslaught, reduced to barren husks. The message was clear. Time was running out. Back inside the ship, Lyora addressed her crew. We've earned their alliance, but this isn't over. When the harvesters come, we'll face them side by side. Every shot counts. Every decision matters. Her words hung in the air, heavy yet galvanizing. The crew exchanged determined glances, their fatigue replaced by grim resolve. They had faced fire and fury to reach this point, and now they would stand united against the coming storm. Outside, lightning split the sky, illuminating the towering spires of the ruins. Somewhere beyond the horizon, the void stirred. The harvesters were coming, and humanity's fate rested on the fragile bond between two vastly different species. The calm before the storm was fleeting. Days passed in a blur of preparation, but the tension aboard the Starblade grew with each passing hour. Captain Lyora Vance stood on the bridge, her gaze fixed on the swirling skies outside. The planet's perpetual storms had intensified, as if mirroring the chaos soon to descend upon them. Lightning arced across the horizon, illuminating the jagged ruins and casting eerie shadows over the Deathworlders gathered below. "They're here," Ravi Patil announced suddenly, his voice trembling as he stared at the sensor readings. The crew froze, their eyes darting toward the main screen. A dark mass loomed on the edge of the atmosphere, a swarm of shadowy forms blotting out the stars. The harvesters had arrived. Lyora clenched her fists, her jaw tightening. "Elias, sound the alarm. Get everyone into position." The ship came alive with activity. Alarms blared throughout the vessel, jolting the crew into action. Malik Hassan sprinted to the engineering bay, ensuring the hybrid weapons were fully charged. Tessa Monroe double-checked medical supplies, her hand steady despite the adrenaline coursing through her veins. Ravi monitored the crystal's energy output, making final adjustments to the targeting systems. Outside, Nyxura and her warriors bristled with anticipation, their glowing cores pulsating faster as they prepared for battle. As the first wave of harvesters descended, the air crackled with malevolent energy. They moved like liquid darkness, shifting and flowing in unnatural ways. Smaller drones peeled off from the swarm, skittering across the ground, with razor-sharp appendages glinting menacingly in the dim light. Behind them, larger entities floated silently, their amorphous bodies writhing with tendrils that seemed to drain life from everything they touched. "Here we go," Ilias muttered under his breath, gripping the controls of the Starblade. The ship roared to life, its engines blazing as it ascended to provide aerial support. From above, they unleashed salvos of plasma blasts, targeting the smaller drones swarming the battlefield. Explosions lit up the landscape, sending shockwaves rippling through the ground. But the harvesters adapted quickly. Their drones scattered, evading fire with unsettling precision. Larger creatures countered by releasing waves of corrosive spores, forcing the Deathworlders to retreat momentarily. The ground forces regrouped behind crumbling spires, using the ruins as cover while returning fire with their newly upgraded weapons. Inside the Starblade, chaos reigned. Alarms screamed as enemy projectiles struck the hull, shaking the ship violently. Tessa clung to a railing, her knuckles white, while Malik shouted orders to reroute power to failing systems. Lyora barked commands from the command center, her voice cutting through the noise like a blade. "Ravi, how's the relic holding up?" she demanded, her eyes locked on the crystal embedded in the console. "It's stable. For now," Ravi replied, sweat dripping down his face. "But if we push it too hard, it could overload." We don't have a choice. Lyora snapped. Divert all available power to the EMP burst. We need to cripple their central hive mind. Outside, Nyxera led her warriors in a desperate charge against the advancing swarm. Their biomechanical claws slashed through drone after drone, but the sheer number of enemies threatened to overwhelm them. One warrior fell, its golden core extinguished as a harvester tendril pierced its chest. Another stepped forward to take its place, roaring defiance into the void. Back aboard the ship, the relic began to destabilize. Warning lights flashed furiously as energy surged uncontrollably. Lyora turned to Ravi, her expression grim. We can't wait any longer. Activate the EMP. But the feedback, Ravi started, panic rising in his voice. I'll handle it, Lyora interrupted, stepping toward the console. She glanced at her crew, her heart heavy with what she was about to do. Everyone, brace yourselves. Before anyone could protest, Lyora activated the EMP sequence manually. A blinding pulse of energy erupted from the crystal, radiating outward in a massive shockwave. Drones disintegrated instantly, and the larger harvester entities convulsed, their movements slowing as their connection to the hive mind faltered. But the cost was immediate. The Starblade shuddered violently, sparks flying as systems overloaded. Lyora staggered, clutching the console for support. Smoke filled the air, and alarms wailed incessantly. Through the viewport, she saw Nyxera and her remaining warriors standing amidst the wreckage, their cores flickering weakly but still alight. For a moment, there was silence, a fragile reprieve from the carnage. But Lyora knew this victory was temporary. The EMP had crippled the swarm, but not destroyed it. And worse, the relic was failing. If they wanted to survive, they'd need another plan, and fast. The battlefield was a wasteland of smoke, shattered ruins, and the eerie silence left in the wake of the EMP blast. The Starblade hovered precariously above the ground, its systems flickering as sparks rained down from overloaded circuits. Inside, the crew scrambled to stabilize the ship while assessing the damage. Lyora Vance stood at the center of the chaos, her face streaked with soot, but her eyes blazing with determination. The EMP worked, Ravi Patil announced, his voice hoarse as he analyzed the readings on his console. Most of the smaller drones are neutralized, and the larger harvester entities are disoriented. But he hesitated, glancing nervously at Lyora. The relic's energy core is destabilizing. If it collapses, it could take out half the planet. Lyora clenched her jaw, her mind racing. How much time do we have? Minutes, maybe less, Ravi replied grimly. We need to vent the excess energy ore. Or someone needs to stay behind and manually contain the overload. Malik Hassan interrupted, his tone unusually calm despite the weight of his words. Everyone turned to look at him, their expressions a mix of shock and disbelief. No, Tessa Monroe said sharply, stepping forward. There has to be another way. There isn't, Malik countered, his dark eyes steady as he met hers. If I don't stabilize the relic, everything we've done will be for nothing. The harvesters will recover, and they'll destroy us all. Elias Drake slammed his fist against the wall in frustration. Damn it, Malik. We're not leaving you here. Malik gave a wry smile, though there was no humor in it. You don't have a choice. Someone has to do this, and I'm the only one who knows how to recalibrate the core in time. Besides, he glanced around at the crew, his voice softening. You're my family. I'm not letting you die because of me. Before anyone could argue further, Malik grabbed a toolkit and headed toward the containment unit housing the relic. Lyora stepped into his path, blocking him momentarily. Her voice was low but firm. Are you sure about this? Malik nodded, his expression resolute. I've never been surer of anything in my life. Lyora stared at him for a long moment before finally stepping aside. She placed a hand on his shoulder, squeezing tightly. Thank you, she said simply, her voice thick with emotion. As Malik worked frantically to stabilize the relic, the rest of the crew prepared to evacuate. Outside, Nyxara and her surviving warriors regrouped, their glowing cores dimmer than before, but still burning with defiance. The Deathworlders watched silently as the Starblade descended to pick up the humans, their massive forms casting long shadows across the devastated landscape. Inside the ship, Malik's voice crackled over the comms. "I've rerouted the energy flow, but I can't hold it forever. Get out of here now." "Malik," Tessa began, tears streaming down her face. "Go," Malik shouted, his tone leaving no room for argument. "Tell everyone. Tell them I did my part." With heavy hearts, the crew launched the Starblade into the sky, just as the relic reached critical mass. Below, a blinding explosion erupted, engulfing the area in a brilliant burst of golden light. The shockwave rippled outward, obliterating the remaining harvesters and cleansing the land of their corruption. On board, the crew sat in stunned silence, their grief palpable. Tessa buried her face in her hands, sobbing quietly, while Elias stared out the viewport, his fists clenched. Ravi slumped in his seat, his shoulders shaking as he struggled to process what had happened. Lyora stood at the front of the bridge, her back straight but her eyes glistening with unshed tears. She turned to face her crew, her voice steady despite the ache in her chest. "Malik gave us a chance, a fighting chance. We owe it to him to make sure his sacrifice wasn't in vain." Outside, Nyxara let out a deep, mournful hum that resonated across the battlefield. Her warriors joined in, creating a haunting chorus that echoed into the void. It was a tribute, not just to Malik, but to all those who had fallen in the fight against the harvesters. As the Starblade soared higher, leaving the scared planet behind, Lyora made a silent vow. They would honor Malik's memory by finishing what he started. The war wasn't over yet, but thanks to his bravery, humanity, and the Deathworlders now had hope. And sometimes, hope was enough to change the course of destiny. The Starblade drifted silently through the void, its battered hull a testament to the battles fought and sacrifices made. Inside, the mood was somber but resolute. The crew moved quietly, their steps heavy with the weight of loss. Malik's absence loomed large, a constant reminder of the price they had paid to survive. Yet, amidst the grief, there was also a flicker of hope, a fragile ember that refused to die. Captain Lyora Vance stood on the bridge, staring out at the endless expanse of stars. Her reflection in the viewport was faint, almost ghostly, but her eyes burned with determination. She replayed Malik's final words in her mind, his voice echoing like a mantra. "Tell them I did my part." And he had. His sacrifice had turned the tide, giving humanity and the Deathworlders a fighting chance against the harvesters. Behind her, Tessa Monroe approached cautiously, holding a small datapad. "Lyora," she said softly, breaking the silence. I thought you should see this." Lyora turned, taking the device from Tessa's trembling hands. On the screen was a message, sent not long after the EMP blast. It was from Central Command, responding to their earlier transmission about the harvesters. The message confirmed what they already feared. Elysium 7 was under threat, with reports of strange energy signatures detected near the colony's outer perimeter. "They're coming for us next," Elias Drake muttered, appearing beside them. His voice was grim, but his expression betrayed no fear, only resolve. Lyora nodded, handing the datapad back to Tessa. "Then we'll be ready. We've faced them once, and we'll face them again." Back on the alien planet, Nyxara and her warriors remained vigilant. The battlefield was scared, littered with remnants of both allies and enemies. But even in destruction, there was renewal. Strange vines began to regrow over the ruins, glowing faintly as if reclaiming the land. Nyxara let out a low hum, her golden core pulsating steadily. She extended one clawed limb toward the sky, as though saluting the stars. Through the translator device left behind by the humans, she sent a message to the Starblade. "Your kind has proven worthy. Together, we will stand against the darkness." When the message reached the ship, it brought a rare moment of peace to the crew. Ravipatl smiled faintly, his fingers brushing against the console. Malik would have liked that, he murmured. He'd have hated the sappy speech, though, Elias quipped, earning a weak laugh from Tessa. For the first time in days, the tension eased slightly. As the Starblade prepared to jump into hyperspace, Leora recorded a final log entry. Her voice was steady, carrying both sorrow and hope. "This journey has cost us dearly," she began, her gaze fixed on the swirling nebula outside. "We've lost friends, faced unimaginable horrors, and stared into the abyss. But we've also found allies, and ourselves. The Deathworlders have shown us that courage knows no species, and sacrifice transcends boundaries. Malik Hassan gave everything so we could live. His name will not be forgotten." She paused, her throat tightening before continuing. "The harvesters are still out there, lurking in the shadows. But now we know how to fight them. Humanity isn't alone anymore. With our new allies, we'll protect Elysium 7 and every other world they threaten. This isn't just our fight, it's everyone's." Her words hung in the air, carried by the hum of the ship's engines. As the Starblade entered hyperspace, streaks of light painted the viewport like brushstrokes on a canvas. Ahead lay uncertainty, danger, and the looming specter of war. But within the hearts of those aboard burned an unshakable belief. Together, they could overcome anything. Far below, Nixura watched the stars fade as the ship disappeared into the distance. Her warriors gathered around her, their cores glowing brighter than ever. They had forged a bond with humanity, one born of shared struggle and mutual respect. Whatever came next, they would face it side by side. In the vastness of space, two vastly different species had united under a single purpose: survival. And perhaps in doing so, they had taken the first step towards something greater, a future where hope triumphed over despair and unity conquered division. For now, that was enough.